how is spinal instability healed over time? So what we need to do is basically look at two different types of structure in the spine, passive and active. Active is the obvious stuff. That's basically your muscles that contribute to spinal stability. So not just what we call your traditional core muscles, things like obliques, for example, but also the muscles that sit, deep within the spine itself, things like multifidus. And we also have passive structures, and probably the most important passive structure to probably pay attention to is the health of the actual discs themselves, because obviously knit together each joint in the spine. And if we go through a phase of hundreds of cycles of compressed flexion, and we start to delaminate the collagen in the disc, it starts to make it a little bit loose. This is even before we start to get dysbulges and herniations. We can have like a joint prone to what McGill calls micro movements. So in terms of active stability, obviously we're looking at the exercises help with that. In terms of the passive stability, it's basically avoiding those aggravators and practicing good spinal hygiene to let things calm down and let the discs start to heal, for example. So you need to approach things from both passive and active, and a good rehab plan will assess both, and it will give you things that cover both aspects of that stability. Question from Nick: how can you keep/improve your cardio when you have a back injury? So step number one, which is I see a lot of people fall into this trap, and a few people do it, particularly triathletes are the worst for this, is you must prioritize that back, and you must be honest with yourself that you have to earn the right to get back into the exercise that you want to do. So you have to make sure that your rehab is at a set enough level that it gives you enough skill and bank account to do the things that you want to do in terms of exercise. So for example, you see plenty of people that will just do, basic level 1 exercises and then go straight back to running and swimming and wonder why their back implodes. So you have to be honest with yourself that you've earned the right to get back to what you want to get into. So for example, as a bare minimum, you should be able to do set of 8 on level 2 side bridges, set of 8 on level 2 bird dogs, and have superb glute control and basic exercises like glute bridges. Once you've got that, you're pretty safe to put in low impact stuff like swimming. High impact stuff like running is a little bit different, and you might also need a bit of skill transference work with things like proprioception and skipping, so that your core muscles learn to fire in the right rhythm and the right way when you run to protect your back. So step one, prioritize the spinal rehab first of all. Once you've got to a reasonable level, you can start to introduce low impact cardio, and as your skill improves, you then earn the right to add in the more sort of impactful, more challenging cardio as you go. Question from Jamie. Hello, thank you so much for answering my question. Sorry to bug you, but I can't get your response out of my head. I assumed my L4, L5 annular tear was from training and running a marathon. Yet it seems the cause of annular tears are due to more rotational movements like golfing or baseball. Does running lead to these kinds of injuries? Thank you for your time. So potentially, yeah. So when we talk about annular tears, we're again, if you're familiar with the work of Professor Stuart McGill, generally we're looking for a rotational movement pattern that's causing that kind of sort of grinding on the disc. And again, it's more volume rather than necessarily aggressiveness of movement, like necessarily swinging a baseball or golf or playing golf and driving. So just volume. If you've got a faulty running technique and you're doing it for hours on end and your shoulders are kind of breaking away from what your hips are doing, you're going to get that rotational twist into that joint. So I could fully see how that's going to form an annular tear. So again, if you've got rotational stability issues, then that kind of, rather than sort of using your core to absorb that rotational force that you're going to generate, it's just going to sit on the disc and start to break and delaminate that disc. So for sure, I could see running, if you've got slightly faulty running techniques and you've got a rotational stability deficiency, for sure I can see that forming an annular tear. So things to look at is to strengthen that rotational stability, so things like bird dogs, for example, and kettlebell drags, those sort of exercises would be good for you. Okay, a question from Sarah here. What's a progression from stir the pots? One thing I've seen is one arm stir the pots. Okay, let's have a look. We'll just have to change the camera angle. My favourite progression on from stir the pot is actually use a ab wheel, but also use it properly. So from here, pop the hips forward, brace on, squeeze the glutes on, keep them locked forward, and then just moving our arms in and out under control. Sort of reps anywhere from sort of 8 to 20 do pretty well. That's my personal favourite. But again, lots of progressions within those two exercises of themselves. Question from Amber. Does a disc herniation increase your risks for premature arthritis and stenosis down the track? Not in and of itself, it's more that if you have a herniation, you've lost a significant amount of disc height. Then obviously we start to lose that gap and movement we need between our facet joints. So what can happen then, if you've lost a significant amount of disc height because of a herniation, you've got to be very careful that your range or your safe range for extension then becomes a bit compromised. That's where you've got to be a bit careful of things like McKenzie method. For that to work really well with things like floppy push-ups and cobra poses, you need 80% of your disc height remaining. So again, an important thing we learned from Professor Stuart McGill there, because if you don't, when you go into that extreme extension, you start to kind of clack together those facet joints, and you start to grind them and irritate them and cause them to obviously inflame and cause pain and problems from that as well. So again, not in and of itself, however, with a disc herniation, if you've lost significant disc height, then that's going to potentially lose the problems, particularly with extension. So again, it depends, not just on the injury, but how far it's gone.